back then, all cock-a-whoop in harmony with the hens, spending money like a drunken sailor, which he squiffily realized he was, both in the nautical and the drunken sense. "Just a bloody nuisance," his father, Sir Hugo, was saying in aspersion, as he wiped his mouth with a napkin as his plate of pudding was whisked away by a table servant. "Women should not gamble any more than they should attempt to smoke or curse." To which their companions at table granted their amiable and dismissive agreements. "Had I the tin, I'd found a man-only club, gentlemen, somewhat like the Cocoa Tree, whites, almacs, or boodles, with the ladies allowed in to dine, and be decorative, surely, but shoo them out by midnight, make a male sanctuary, before they overrun all our masculine institutions by the battalions. Dash it all, a place where men may rest twixt entertainments, perhaps with lodgings, where a fellow may let down his hair and put up his feet." "Hear, hear!" one of their fellow diners cheered. "Gentlemen of standing and quality only allowed," he posed, drawing agreement from several others who had been seated by twos or singletons at their long table, hit or miss. "An in-town retreat for serving officers, say," another opined. "Reasonably priced, of course, so we won't have to hunt high and low for lodgings each time we come up to London. Like a regimental mess, a wardroom, or—" The gentleman in army uniform, a captain of foot, proposed. He was well turned out, but half his worth was surely on his back, Lewrie thought, not in his purse or with his banker. "What say you, Captain Lewrie?" the army man asked him. "An intriguing idea?" "Most," Lewrie answered, which was about all he could manage as a belch arose, redolent of baked sole, roast beef, pigeon pie, and wine. "A refuge from domesticity," he glumly supposed. To which sentiment all 8 men present voiced an earnest "Ever and Amen," with a hearty rumbling cheer, though his father peered over at him with a chary, cutty-eyed look of pending disapproval. Sir Hugo had warned him that, should he turn maudlin and weepy, he'd deny knowing him, and leave him to stew in his own misery. "Quite intriguing, Captain Brown," Sir Hugo mused, louder than necessary perhaps to draw attention from his son to himself, after a stern, silent warning, which came off, as most of Sir Hugo's facial expressions, as a nettled falcon's leer, before prosing on. "The best part of a coffee-house in the mornings, with rafts of daily papers, good conversation, good wine-cellar, with decent sets of rooms to let, for members only when down from the country, members of Parliament, for serving officers, as you suggest, Captain Brown, an establishment that offers only the freshest victuals, so that no one dies for trying the fare at a twopenny ordinary. Ah!" "Exactly, General Willoughby," another of their fellow diners opined in a plummy voice, "with annual dues and daily charges, just high enough to dissuade the lower orders, but within the reach of purses of most gentlemen, with requirements, mark you, sirs, for good character and decorous gentlemanly behaviour." The very idea of a reference from one's vicar as part of one's bona fides set them back in a stunned silence for a moment. The fellow was sober-dressed, spare and gaunt-looking. Was he a dissenter, one of those killjoys? Well, that would let me out, and father too, Lewrie told himself. "Within the club, of course, sirs," the fellow amended quickly, seeing the response he'd drawn. "Mean to say, run riot on your own, but damn me if I'll tolerate hoo-roaring drunks who drop their shoes and giggle past my bedtime. Schoolboy antics, sons down from university with all their silly carryings on." Well, that was all right, then. One of their fellow diners looked ready to call for quill, ink, and paper to begin setting down the bylaws instanter. Grandly liveried waiters set out fresh glasses, dishes of grapes and berries, plates of sliced cheeses with both sweet and salted biscuits before them, along with baskets of assorted nuts, with shell bowls and nutcrackers. Sir Hugo sternly proposed a toast to the king, safe to do with the water glasses removed, so toasting Hanoverian George III could not be rendered into one for the exiled Stuart claimant, the king over the water, by a sly pass of one's port-glass. "Gentlemen, allow me to propose our second," Captain Brown said as he got to his feet, "in honor of our dining companion who fought at Camperdown and won us the marvelous victory all England celebrates tonight. To the Royal Navy and Camperdown." "Navy and Camperdown," they concisely echoed on their feet. Lewrie, too, rose, though a naval officer never stood to toast the king if he valued his scalp. Low deck beams made their own tradition. Which sentiment was quickly followed by a toast to Admiral Duncan, now made Baron Duncan of Lundy and Viscount Duncan of Camperdown. Then followed by a toast to Lewrie himself as a representative of the fleet that had won the victory, through which he modestly sat, forming turns of phrase in his head for the expected gallant response. "Gentlemen, my thanks to you for the honor, though I must confess that my part in the battle was not that significant," he answered in kind, though the gold Camperdown medal bestowed upon him by the king that afternoon tinkled against the matching Battle of Cape St. Vincent medal. "Pshaw!" Sir Hugo objected. "You took one of their frigates." Their boisterous toasting and cheering had drawn enough notice from the elegant crowd in the dining rooms, but his father said it loud enough to turn it into an attention-getting boast on the spawn of his loins. "Allow me to answer with a threefold proposal," Alan said as he got to his feet, a trifle unsteadily, making a supportive triangle from the fingers of his right hand for a moment, before taking up a refilled glass of port to hold before him and peer into its semi-opaque redness, as if for inspiration. "First, for my ship, the Proteus frigate, the finest, soundest fifth-rate that ever swam. Secondly, to her crew, the bravest tars ever plied rammer, rope, or cutlass. From highest to lowest, they produced victory, every man Jack. And lastly, to our recent foes, the Dutch. They fought us English fashion, hull to hull, yard-arm to yard-arm, and held stout to the last, past the time when their hopes were gone. Gentlemen, I give you HMS Proteus, her crew, and a worthy foe." "Proteus, tars, sailors, your crew, the Dutch, foes," others babbled, mangling his toast. Lewrie feared it would be too much for them, but to blazes with that, he thought. They were lusty and loud, and that was what counted. Loud enough to raise huzzas from the onlookers, too, who'd been drawn by the noise at their table. "Trying to prove your sobriety," his father teasingly said as he seated himself again, "showing how you can still form compound sentences this late." "Wanted it out and done before I went under the table," Lewrie told him, "else we'd all be half seas over before we got round to the toasts to the ladies." Quite a few of the onlookers were fashionably dressed ladies in company of male companions, or two women out together despite the rigid rules of London society, dashing, unconventional morts who ogled him as openly as he'd ogle them given the chance. A mixture of hero-worship, sympathy for his nobly wounded wing, that broken left arm still hung in a neat sling, one or two licking their lips and half-lidding eyes. "Here, Captain Lewrie," the elegantly dressed man, Mr. Lambdin, whom they discovered was a city banker, demanded. "The papers don't tell us half of how 'twas done. Do give us your account of it. Tell us the whole tale." "Aye, and leave naught out," another pressed. "Well," Lewrie said, unwillingly forced to his feet again by their enthusiasm and the chance to preen for an audience, "I will need the biscuits, nuts, and such, if you really insist." A row of salted biscuits quickly formed the Dutch coast, while walnuts became ships of the line, and smaller hickories became frigates and sloops of war. Lewrie looked at his creation, trying to picture a bird's view from the confused smoke and haze-riddled scene he'd had from his quarterdeck, wondering where or how to start to explain it at all. How does one reorganize chaos? "When we sighted them, the wind was out of the nor'-nor'-west and fairly strong," he said, arrowing a hand, slantwise, at the long line of Dutch ships. "I'm told they had been sailing easterly, making for Calais and the Channel, but came about when our scouting frigates got hull up on 'em." "Running," the abstemious gentleman pronounced.